Hey, everybody. Welcome.
So Chris believes he needs to tell me to enunciate. And anybody who saw our little video that went out on TikTok, you catch him saying to me, enunciate. And just before we went live here, he says to me, don't forget to enunciate.
You don't need to be reminded. I just like to throw that out last minute. Curveballs. Anyway, so we are super excited. We are Alex Jones, G. Edward Griffin, super freedom movement before there was a freedom movement, truth movement before there's a truth movement. Excited today. I'm kind of a little bit fanboy in today.
Yeah, we're both kind of starstruck and a little bit giddy, and we don't typically get giddy or starstruck because people are people, and we all get dressed the same, we all bleed the same, we all hurt and struggle the same stresses. But yet I've been watching this man for at least 4 years. 4 years ago, he was introduced to me, not in person, but on I believe he was still on YouTube at that point in time. And that's how I came to my understanding of what is happening in the world. It was this gentleman's video on the Khazarian mafia and the oil families and the royal blood families that got me started down this torrential downpour of information. So I'm really excited that he is here today with us. And for those of you who tuned in last Thursday, we apologize. We forgot to say it was Halloween, so we weren't going to do a show because we would probably be busy at our door answering trick-or-treaters. So those who tuned in and didn't see us, our biggest apologies, but we hope you had a great weekend anyway. And in the meantime, we've got James Corbett.
James, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Hey guys, no problem. Glad to be here. But I'm at a disadvantage because I'm not as familiar with your work and your background. So 2 questions. 1, where are you based? And 2, TFM. What does that stand for?
So we are based about an hour east of Toronto. Chris, originally, when we started the show 2.5 years ago, he was out on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. A year and a half ago, he moved to Ontario. So we are an hour east of Toronto. And TFM, when we first started, Chris's fantastic idea of taking our language back from the global predators that claim to own us, the fringe minority, as Mr. Trudeau called us, and we took it and claimed it as the fringe majority. So that's how we started. And about a year and a half ago, we rebranded to TFM Report because anytime you saw the fringe majority listed anywhere, of course, you got blackballed and censored. So trying to play the censorship game didn't work. At the end of the day, they still found us and censor us whenever they can.
Right. We got booted off Google. So, so it's time to make a change.
Well, I won't hold it against you that you're Easterners because at least you were from the West. All right, I'll accept that.
We're a half and half, right?
Yeah. A little
the
bit
black and white cookie.
But you're not here anymore. You were started out in Canada, but you're an expat now. And what made you move?
So I grew up in Alberta. I'm an Alberta boy, and I lived in and around Calgary and around Edmonton for all my life, and then went to Ireland to study for a year, Anglo-Irish literature at Trinity College. And once I was done with that, I was really just looking for another way to delay life for another year. What can I do? I need to actually earn some money now to pay back some of the student debt from going to Trinity. So what do I do? And I met someone on campus one day who said, hey, I'm looking into teaching English in Asia. And I thought, hey, that's an idea. I've never been there before. So I went online, started searching, found a company, applied, got the job. Suddenly I'm flying out to Japan. That was 20 years ago. So here I am.
Wow. That was about the same time. Now you've been in this. I struggle for the right word. It's not, I can't stand the cliche freedom movement, truth movement, all that stuff. So you've been kind of the voice of truth for, it's almost 2 decades now, isn't it?
I started the Corbett Report in 2007. So that's 17 years.
Wow. And you've been around for a long time. And that's what we're saying. Like, we're super excited because you're not just spreading rhetoric. You're not just going like, they're poisoning the water, and by the way, I sell Berkey Light. You're a deep researcher, and that's something we like highly respect because you actually dig right into your stuff. So, and you've been doing that for like you say, 17 years. So that's,
well, you know what? I've hit on a different way of describing what I do, because I've always struggled with that. What is it? I mean, I'm a journalist. That doesn't quite seem like the order. No, researcher. Yeah, okay, maybe more closer. But actually, I've hit on it recently. I think I'm an educator.
nice.
Fundamentally,
I like
is
that.
teaching a lesson. All right, class, this week we're going to talk about this. And like you would expect from any good professor who's teaching a lesson, well, here's all the sources, go read this for yourself. And when you put it in that context, I think it perhaps frames what I do in a at least a more helpful way. This isn't conspiratainment, this isn't popcorn stuff, it's not a TikTok video. I'm not here to entertain you per se. I'm here to inform and educate those people who want to be educated. And I get not everyone wants to sit through a lecture in a classroom, right? That's fine.
Right.
But if you do, hopefully I can provide some of that.
Right. So are you finding now that, like, are you kind of getting a little bit more hope welling up and with you? Because you are one of very few voices. I mean, back in the day, like I'd say 15 years ago, there was you, there's Alex Jones, there was G. Edward Griffin, there was
David Icke.
There weren't a lot of voices really that were doing what, I mean, they've sprung up out of the ground now. But so are you does that give you hope? Or are you...
Yes, yes, but on a very, very fundamental structural level. It's not. I don't think it's that fundamentally some huge change has occurred in the population. To some extent, maybe there has, but fundamentally, what's changed is more people now have a voice. More people. It's easier for people now to get their message out there and to talk to people and communicate to people than it has ever been in all of human history, and that's to the good. More people to the conversation is better. Even people who don't agree with me. What? You don't agree with me? No, I don't want you to say anything. I want you to shut up. No, I want more people at the table, and I want it to become completely trivial and mundane. Oh, you got a podcast? I got a podcast too. Oh, everyone has a seat at the table and can join the conversation, and that's to the good. The only people who want to limit that are the tyrants and authoritarians.
Exactly. We're of the same opinion. We have other podcasters on the show all the time to talk about what's going on, and what's happening in the West is different than what's happening in the East, and what's happening in Ireland and the US and Australia. It's all different. So the more we can share information and knowledge, the more powerful we are, and the more united we become as well. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we contacted you, you said, well, what do you want to talk about? We're like,
there's a plethora of ideas. I don't know.
Lots of stuff. We know lots of stuff. We're happy to go down any avenue. I think the things that are really big on your mind right now are Peter Thiel and BRICS, and those are the things you're kind of delving into right now. We're driving into the green economy and how that's going to be, how it's designed to take your money and your house away. So that's sort of the stuff we're focusing on. So
sure.
I mean,
I've had quite a bit to say on that over the years as well. So for people who don't know, maybe go to corbettreport.com/big oil. That might be the best way to start an education on the real history of the environmental movement as it has developed into Environmental Movement Inc. /Environmental Movement Government Branch. It's just very different than people who have genuine concerns about the environment. Hey, we all care about the world and the state of nature that we're leaving for our grandchildren, but there are people who want to play on those sympathies in order to bring in an authoritarian agenda that suits their purposes, and basically to monopolize the resources of planet Earth in their interests. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been sold a bill of goods when it comes to that. And that brings in the whole, not just multi-billion, not just multi-trillion, we're talking $100 trillion plus dollars of investable capital that has now been accrued in the hands of the GFANs and these other organizations, these international bodies that are, what are they? They're non-governmental, but they have obviously a lot of governmental players at the table that they can swing entire economies around to suit their interests. And what is the real end goal of this? Well, don't take my word for it. Go look at a report that came out from the UK Fires organization a couple of years ago, which involves Oxford and some other organizations. They came out with this report called Absolute Zero, which talks about, no, the idea isn't net zero. We don't want to get to net zero because that's like a game where you can offset your emissions with, the carbon sequestration, easy for me to say, whatever. But no, that's not what we're going for. We're going for absolute zero. No emissions will be made by human activity. How do you do that? Well, in the report, they come out and say, well, of course, this will mean the end of the construction industry. It will mean the end of all international travel. It will mean the end of international shipping of goods, for example. There's just no way to do that right now without emissions. But, oh, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. End of human civilization. But it'll be worth it, guys.
Right. That's what because there's the unfortunate byproduct of total complete death as well. And that's, but that's okay.
Yeah, absolute zero. Let's put their words in the right context, because when they talk about rationing your carbon or reducing your carbon footprint, they're talking about reducing life. Correct. When they talk about absolute zero, they mean absolute zero in terms of you useless eaters out there. We're going to reduce you to zero.
Right. Yeah, that's the meme going around. You're the carbon they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So exactly right.
But it's so true, and so many people have bought into that. I actually just got home about 45 minutes ago from a meeting that was being held in our township, where this developer wants to come in and basically take prime A grade agricultural land, 1,600 acres of it, and turn it into mobile homes because there's a shortage of housing, and a recreation center and some shopping malls. And, most of the people there, and it's the first time I've ever seen a packed house at any of our local meetings. So congratulations to Hamilton Township, Corbett Report Hope people that actually showed up for a change in care. But everybody that spoke at that mic, except for two people, were 100% against the plan, saying, there's only 5% of farmland left. Can you not find another spot to develop? There's 95% of land available for you to develop. How about you go do it there? And one gentleman who's an architect for 45 years said, you know what? You're an opportunist developer. You see some great land sitting on Lake Ontario. You see that the infrastructure, the roads and all of that are already there. And that's why you're after it. And one of the ladies who spoke up in rebuttal to them being there, she actually, I thought, wow, this lady knows her stuff. She's onto it. She gets it. Until she threw in, and because of climate change, we need to save the farmlands because we are losing farmlands due to climate change. And I'm like, you're not with it. You don't quite understand what's going on.
Apparently, they don't even read NASA press reports. Oh, yeah, the world is greened by whatever it is, 20% plus in the past few decades as carbon dioxide has been rising. Oh, by the way, they can't actually tie carbon dioxide rising levels to human activity, let alone all the million other little details that kind of throw a spanner in the works of the whole climate change narrative. But yeah, I get it. You know what? Here's where I get a ray of hope is that when I was doing this a couple of decades ago, I would get consistently, whenever I talked about the climate change swindle for what it was, I would get people who would say, how can you think scientists are lying? Why would scientists ever lie about anything? But over the last few years, I think more people have cottoned on to the fact, oh yeah, maybe some of these medical researchers and scientists, maybe they have interests, and maybe they're not floating on clouds and totally disinterested from things. So I think people are starting to catch on to the fact that, oh yeah, okay, so the last few years of medical insanity was all a lie. I wonder what else I've been lied to, scientifically speaking.
Yeah, we forget that 4 out of 5 doctors recommended Camel cigarettes. We forget that they were in favor of asbestos. We forget not that long ago they were in favor of oil, and not that long ago Pfizer got fined $2.1 billion for lying. So I'm
old enough to remember when Big Pharma wasn't trusted by most of the population.
Right.
Or politicians.
Yeah. Big Pharma wasn't even allowed on TV or to advertise their drugs, and now it's everywhere. Right.
And now the news is advertising for their drugs. So there you
exactly. Cheap advertising, I tell you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the older you get, I'm skeptical because, I survived the ozone layer crisis. That's me.
Acid rain.
Now, you come back at me with this stuff and I'm like, come on. Right. I've already been down that road. So,
yeah.
So do you have any desire to speculate on what life looks like after the election in the West here?
Yeah, it's a good question because it is the first time since 2009 that the LDP haven't had a ruling majority. So the real question is, I mean, Ishiba seems like he's not going to step down, but then who do you think might step up if he did? Or could the opposite? Oh, you're not talking about Japanese politics? Sorry. Oh, sorry, guys.
We're ready to roll with you, but
we're Canadians. We have to talk about American political
it could be American, it could be Canadian. I thought you were talking about Canadian there for a minute.
Oh,
no, that's Mark Carney. The answer is Mark Carney.
I was putting it in parliamentary context, so
that's right.
No, but
stepping up. Yeah.
In case people are interested, I recently had a chance to address the Japanese diet, which was an unusual activity. So back in September, I was at a conference, the International Crisis Summit, that was talking about the upcoming, at that time, now it's actually happened, release of the self-amplifying mRNA vaccines on the Japanese population. Japan has become the one and only country in the entire world so far to approve self-amplifying mRNA vaccines.
Yes,
which people know, of course, the old, that time-tested, true technology of mRNA vaccines, where they hijack your body cells to start producing proteins. Don't worry, guys. That's all it does, and it's all pinpoint laser accuracy. Don't worry, guys. But now it's self-amplifying mRNA vaccines. So they not only put the mRNA in, but they put in a replicase protein that will start constructing more of this modified RNA within your body that will then hijack more of your body cells. What could go right? Anyway, so we had there was this summit here, and the bunch of doctors and scientists from around the world that came to address the Japanese public, and there was a session held at the Japanese Diet, and I got a couple of minutes to address the assembled people in that room. Only two of whom were actual Japanese Diet members. Of course, the vast majority of the Japanese Diet did not show up for that, for obvious reasons. But at any rate, I did get to at least declare my bodily sovereignty and just say in front of the Japanese Diet, no, you do not. No government has the right to tell me what to do with my body.
That's amazing. We had Dr. Mark Trazzi on the show just after he came back from Japan. Talked to Ryan Cole like he was still in the same clothes as when he flew back in. So they kind of gave a little bit of report. Ryan Cole seemed a little more optimistic than Dr. Trazzi did, but so you must have met them at the same time because I think they were in that room. But
so what are you seeing in Japan since that rollout, or are you seeing anything?
I haven't seen the numbers coming out as to how many people may or may not have been injected with this monstrosity. I don't think they'll give a straightforward answer to that because so the eighth round of booster jabs have just gone into the Japanese public's arms. And people who are, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old are still taking them. They're still, I think 40% are still taking their what is it? Bi-monthly jabs? I don't know how often it is now, but at any rate, something like 40% are on their eighth round of boosters. And so this eighth round that just the vaccination drive is happening in October. And that's the one where they were using self-amplifying mRNA vaccines. But that was only one of the vaccines they were giving as part of this booster round. So how many people actually got it so far? What are the numbers on it? I don't think I haven't seen any of those numbers yet. So remains to be seen. But obviously, this is part, I think, on the wider scale, this is about introducing the concept and the idea and normalizing it. Hey, they're doing it in Japan. So why not do it in Canada or wherever else?
Yeah.
So what's the Japanese culture like? Like awareness? Who's awake and aware? Do you have a percentage guesstimate?
Well, it's honestly a lot harder to get that sense because generally speaking here in Japan, as certainly in mixed company or what have you, people don't talk openly about politics or potentially contentious issues. It's more about social harmony, so people don't directly contradict each other or get into screaming, shouting matches. So it's hard sometimes to know where people really stand. But it has been hardening, as I've pointed out in my coverage, for example, of that summit and other things that I've seen here in Japan. It's been obviously there is a groundswell of people here who are concerned about this. And in fact, that was to be expected. Before all this rolled out, one of the key themes in a lot of the media was, Japan is usually vaccine hesitant and they're very careful with their vaccines. So we don't know if they're going to take this new mRNA vaccine technology. Well, Japan not only took it, they took it in droves, and whatever it is, 80+% of the population ended up getting injected. So whatever it was worked well enough, but it wasn't a top-down authoritarian structure here. It's much more horizontal. So there was more social pressure, and it was more structured, essentially big people working for big companies. Your boss puts out a big directive. Everyone's going to get vaccinated. Everyone lines up and gets vaccinated. There's no discussion about it. But over the course of the past years, surely, we've definitely seen a bigger growing movement of people who are concerned about this. And this is manifested in some high-profile doctors and scientists and researchers holding press conferences. There's been massive rallies here, tens of thousands of people. You had one of those Japanese Diet members, one of the people who was in the room listening to me and the others there, has gone out and publicly apologized to the Japanese public for the mRNA vaccines.
Wow.
You've had NHK, which is like the Japanese CBC, basically, aired a report on one of their main morning news programs where they were talking about vaccine injuries, and they said we've had thousands of people writing in to request this, so let's talk about it. And so they've had people on. So there's definitely something happening here. I think the Japanese public are at least aware there's a problem. Right.
Is the culture much more, from an outside perspective, I've never been there, so totally uneducated question here, but is they're much more shame and honor driven, go along to get along kind of thing than we are. Is that correct? Or
very much so, much less in terms of open confrontation with people or directly contradicting someone. So it can be exceptionally frustrating when as you're navigating your way through social life here. But once you get used to it, you realize, they even have a word for it. There's a word for what you say to people in public versus what you really believe. And there's definitely a distinction there. So it's hard sometimes to get a gauge on where the Japanese public really sits on some of these things. But as I say, for example, so one of the things, for example, that tells you something about Japanese society is the fact that in almost the entirety of the post-World War II era of the modern constitutional democratic system here in Japan, has been ruled essentially by one party. There's been a couple of brief pockets where a different party got into power, but it's essentially one party. So in Japanese politics, it isn't about which party. It's not even like a liberal conservative kind of thing. It's just this party will be in power. Who will be in charge of this party? It's all about the internal factions within the party. Who will be the leader? Who will become the prime minister? Right. So that's essentially how Japanese politics works. But they just had a selection process last month that, for the first time in 15 years, and one of the only times in modern history, the LDP, the major ruling party, didn't secure an outright majority with their coalition partner. So there's been a lot of jockeying, how will they be able to govern and all of this. So anyway, the Japanese public are not happy with their politicians. It's not like they vote for the same party every time because they think it's going to improve life for them or it's better or anything. It's just that there's no alternative, essentially.
Huh. It's very different. So does the Canadian, American, Western politics, does that really affect Japan, or do they really just not care?
I wouldn't say Canadian politics is a common conversation point over here. American politics, unfortunately, as you know, everyone in the world is affected by American politics. So
Correct.
It's become a discussion point.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So what do you think is going to happen tomorrow? Do you have predictions, or, way off on the other side of the pond? Do you care?
What? I can I don't have a prediction. I can definitively tell you what is going to happen.
Okay.
Whoever you vote for, they win. And by they, I mean they, them, those, the technocrat authoritarians who want to control your life. And it don't matter whether you're voting for a Team Coke or Team Pepsi, because they control both corporations.
Fair. You're one of the few people who actually is aware of that. And you're one of the few people that doesn't buy into the Marxist division of everything. You're also one of the few people who calls it like it is when it comes to Elon Musk. And the people who are aware of Elon Musk, that seems to be a dwindling minority as we go along. So I totally agree with you. It's all theater, but I was listening to one of your talks just the other day when you're saying, like, careful not to say that everything is completely controlled and everything is completely scripted. yes, to a degree, I think a lot of it is, and I think a lot of it is very controlled. But we'll tell you just as much as anyone else, they hate spontaneity, they hate independence, and if the more spontaneous they are, or we are, the less they know what to do with that. And
yes.
mistakes
No,
are made.
I recognize that it could be like people might hear my message and think that I'm saying that you don't have any power and it's all controlled, and so whatever, give up and go home or something like that. But that's the exact opposite of my message. My message is that the stupid political spectacle sideshow that they put on the cave wall for you to be entertained about is totally, utterly irrelevant and meaningless to your life. Your life is what you make of it, what you do with your time and attention and energy and resources. So I personally, I'm an anarchist. I think voting in their rigged, stupid system for the ring of political authority is itself an immoral act. So I certainly wouldn't condone it. But if you're going to go do that, fine, whatever. Go and cast your vote for your candidate of choice. It's a meaningless ballot in a slave suggestion box that will be ignored as needed. But once you do that, can you spend 1/10 of the amount of time and energy and resources and attention that you put into the political sideshow spectacle, 1/10 into something in your community, in your real world, spending your time and your energy actually building up a community of something that you want in this world, rather than just voting and thinking that that somehow is actual action in the world? It is not. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm a big proponent of
We're done.
You need to vote, because at the end of the day, these are the people that make the rules of society that we live in. And if you don't vote, then you didn't have a say. Even though I also believe the system is rigged, even though I believe that it's one big giant uniparty, and I believe that we got to that one big giant uniparty because people stopped paying attention, because they stopped using their voice, and because they stopped showing up, essentially, and they just handed over their authority to somebody else because it was too boring, too whatever, too onerous to actually get involved, too onerous to pay attention to the pieces of paper that were being slid across the table. And now we're in this crazy clown world that is full of all of these predators that keep creating more jobs for the predators and then keep dipping into our pockets and taking back, saying, thank you very much. Thank you for sleeping.
Right. Despite the fact that people have been voting in the past, it's almost like voting hasn't prevented this from happening. No, I would say your vote is your vote for you are voting for the system, insofar as you say, I am participating in this and I agree. Whoever gets 50% plus one is the authoritarian who can do what he wants with the country. Nope. I am an individual, sovereign human being. These politicians, these disgusting psychopaths who want that ring of power, have no power over me and my authority in my life. And I don't participate in their stupid, absolute nonsense that they try to impose these rules and orders. Nope, absolutely doesn't apply to me. I do not give them my time or attention or energy. I do not give my consent. I didn't vote, therefore I can complain. You vote, you can't complain. But what, as I say, whatever, vote if you want to. Go cast your vote in the slave suggestion box, or as it is these days, touch the touch screen, which will then flitter away your vote. And don't worry, guys, it'll really be counted. It won't, but whatever. People can do that. But just stop making that your identity. Stop caring so much about their stupid system. Build things in the real world that you want to bring into the real world. That will change the world. Voting won't.
Well, us standing up is what will change the world. Us sharing information is what will change the world. But I'll tell you what, when those predators freeze your bank accounts because you don't agree with their rules, really
then
hard.
You better have another way of transacting. And if you were involved in communities of interest that were involved in, for example, finding different ways of transacting other than the controlled currency that comes from the central bankers that are printing money out of nothing, until we start to see the basic roots of the system and the fact that all of the power is ours. And so one example of that I love to point to is the fact that over the past few years, at the very least, all the scamdemic nonsense craziness, it showed people at the very least, who are the businesses and the business owners in my area who actually are part of this community and care about me and are on my team, and who are the people who are going to shut me out because I didn't take some medical intervention or what have you. And then after all of this goes away, oh yeah, that COVID nonsense dream that we had, whatever, let's go back to life as usual. Now are you going to support those businesses that showed you who they were? No, of course not.
No.
You're going to give your time and energy and resources over to the people who were part of that community that you know in a real crisis you can rely on. Those are the people. And suddenly, hey, at least you can see who's on what team, right? And you start building that up. And why do we have to necessarily interact in these, not even pieces of paper anymore, these digital things floating through the wires? Why can't we create an alternative currency or a community currency or something else? Crazy pie in the sky nonsense. Why would you think of that? Because they are going to turn off your bank account, and no vote in a slave suggestion box is going to stop that nightmare from coming to fruition. We have to create the systems of community structures that will be the things that see us through, no matter what they, them, those in Ottawa or anywhere else are doing.
Right. Now, in the absence of government, though, however, in Canada, we know that China owns 70% of a lot of the stuff around here. So in the absence of government, they would just step in to protect their national interests. So we agree with you. The party system is a joke.
Done.
It's theater. There's no sense. We could get on board with independence if you were the best independent in your area that would represent your area, and then the best person for the job to run portfolios. We would kind of be on board with that. So does your anarchist view extend to that far? Like you just wouldn't even support that kind of system?
I understand the principle of subsidiarity. So the idea is that power should function at the lowest possible level that it can function, rather than having big central vast federal programs or governments or what have you. You should have it as local as possible, right? So that you have at least some potential for some actual control over the process, right? And I certainly agree, and I think that's fundamentally part of the decentralization, which I think is the incredibly important part of what I advocate for: decentralization of information and everything else, so that there are not these centers of power that are the ring that everyone's fighting over all the time. And so I understand that, and fair enough. I'm not going to poo-poo people who think that going in the more local political dimension is the way to go. Good. Go do whatever you want to do. That's fine. But again, I think just concentrating on the politics, as if government is what solves these problems, as if government is the only way or the only matrix through which we can understand power and how it manifests in our world. As if, for example, the average Canadian out there wouldn't be concerned about the Chinese influence or what have you. There's just no possible way we could imagine or do anything about that if it wasn't for government stepping in to save us. No, we are not children until we grow up and take adult responsibility for our lives and come together and see what we can do as actual human beings in the real world, in communities of interest. I think we won't quite understand. We will never realize human potential until we get past this adolescent stage of our development.
I agree. I think the only reason we need government is essentially to run the infrastructure. That's it. They don't need to be making rules. We all understand natural law. We all understand love your neighbor. We all understand right from wrong. So I don't think we need a government to tell us right from wrong, how to raise our children and all of that. That's all bullshit. Government is only there, as far as I'm concerned, to look after the infrastructure, to make sure we have defense, make sure we've got lights on, make sure we've got roads, make sure that there's hospitals and stuff functioning. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where their role ends. Someone's got to run the stuff. So just run the stuff. But who runs the stuff needs to be the people who are educated enough to actually run it. A doctor should be running our healthcare system.
Yeah, it's the old, but who would build the roads? Which is, to me, is the funniest kind of question that you should ask an anarchist, because the answer is the exact same people who build the roads right now would build the roads in an anarchist future. It's just that it wouldn't have a government middleman scraping off the top. But I understand the principle. I understand what you're going for. It's in the right direction, so I'll go for it. But fundamentally, no, political authority is immoral. It's evil, and I fundamentally stand opposed to it.
100%.
So with globalists at the gate, and with so many people are predicting civil war in the States, and I mean that's where the political divide has gotten us at this point. We all know that it's a Marxist communist takeover, and we all know we're in the Marxist phase now. So do you have any idea of where do you think all this is going to go in the next couple of days? Or
well, I won't tell you about a couple of days, but I'll tell you about a couple of decades. And no, it's not Marxist communist. It is technocratic. And until we understand that this is not about Marxist communism, this is about technocracy. And until we understand what technocracy is, how it functions, and how it plays both sides of the controlled political aisle, we won't really understand what we're living through and thus won't be able to combat it. So for people who need the crash course, technocracy is an ideology, an economic / political ideology that was developed primarily in the late 1920s into the 1930s by a couple of people. There was this charlatan named Howard Scott who pretended to have a bunch of credentials that he didn't have. He was allowed into the basement of, I want to say, Columbia University. I stand to be corrected. But at any rate, he got set up with on the inside of the political track, as it were, to start developing this idea. One of the people who was helping him with this was a person named M. King Hubbert, who people might recognize as Hubbert's peak, which they probably know these days as peak oil, the peak oil theory that was developed by this petroleum geologist, M. King Hubbert, who wrote this technocracy study manual. And so they developed this idea that they were going to, because this was the 1930s when they were really developing this and foisting it, and they've developed this big movement of people who were willing to go for it because it was the middle of the Great Depression. And look, clearly capitalism, free market, that has failed. So we need something else. And so there were people, signing up to be communists. There were the people casting about. Technocracy came along and said, we are going to scientifically engineer society. We're going to precisely engineer. We're going to get technocrats, engineers, scientists, eggheads who know what they're doing to be in these positions of power. It's not going to be a government. It's going to be a technate. So, for example, you'll have the North American technate. It won't be the American government or anything like that. And these people are going to perfectly calculate all of the inputs that are going into society in terms of what they need to manufacture whatever it is we need, the toothbrushes and the everything that we have, the guitar picks and everything else we have lying around. We're going to scientifically calculate how much energy is needed for that production. That's going to be our energy allotment for the year. And they're going to apportion that out to the public as energy credits. We're not going to have money anymore. You're going to get an energy credit as a good citizen of the technate. And that will allow you will purchase at the store, whatever you need in energy credits. And if you run out of credits, oh, well, too bad. Wait for the next monthly stipend or whatever it is that you receive. So there was this whole idea and this whole movement surrounding this. And it was a movement. It was a big thing. Look up technocracy in the 1930s, and they have these uniforms and they're going around marches. It was a big thing in Canada. And oh, by the way, who was ahead of the Technocracy Party in Saskatchewan in the 1930s? Oh yeah, Elon Musk's grandfather, who eventually got run out of Saskatchewan. They went to South Africa. That's why Elon Musk is from South Africa. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But so this idea of technocracy was, as I say, it was a big deal in the 1930s. And now no one's even heard of it. No one remembers it. No one cares, right? But the idea is still around. The idea went underground. The idea never died. The idea still manifests in the fundamental political ideology of the authoritarians who want to rule over us, because it is a perfectly wonderful authoritarian ideology. It can straddle it. Of course, there are elements of communism in there, and there are elements of capitalism, crony capitalism in there. But the point is the authoritarian trough of power, which absolutely was insane in the 1930s. The idea, because part of the system was they were going to have to calculate every transaction that was going on in the economy in real time to understand how much energy was, being used in the manufacture of all these goods that were being bought and sold. It was crazy. It was pie in the sky thinking in the 1930s when they're doing everything on pen and paper. 2024, it's pretty trivial. In fact, they pretty much have all of these databases of what's being sold in real time, right? It's a trivial thing to create that. And now what are they talking about? Oh, maybe we'll have to make carbon credits. And, maybe we can start thinking of the economy in terms of carbon credits. And, a UBI. Don't worry, guys, you don't have to work anymore. We're just going to give you money in the form of maybe carbon credits. And, if you've got your 18th booster, you might get your UBI this month, et cetera, et cetera. This is what it is. This is the vision for the future. So I can tell you in the coming decades, this is the way it's going. That's why digital ID, CBDC, all of these things are so vital to the functioning of this system, because it is about authoritarian control in the name of, don't worry, we'll take care of everything and we'll perfectly balance society. It's nonsense. It's absolute, it's not just nonsense, it's nightmarish. Because, for example, I recently had a presentation that I delivered at the Liberty on the Rocks Festival in Sedona, Arizona. This conference talking about anarchist ideas. And my presentation was on a sort of a parody idea. I did an announcement from the, I think I got it here. I did an announcement from the Ministry of Toothbrushes.
Oh no.
So I was the minister of toothbrushes, and I was, informing wonderful news. We have wonderful news for you. We're not only going to meet, but we're going to exceed our ration of toothbrush production this year. Yay! But the one problem with this is, of course, it will all be one toothbrush: men's, women's, child's, adult. No, it will all just be one toothbrush, and you will be able to purchase it at the government store for your carbon credits. So, yay! Wonderful production. And then the big reveal in that presentation is, okay, haha, yeah, that's just a joke. That's stupid satire, right? But actually, that's literally, truly, really how it operated back in the good old Soviet Union, of course, right?
Yes.
They literally had ministers and agencies overseeing production of every single consumer good, women's pantyhose, toothbrushes, everything else. And I show the Adam Curtis documentary where they're going through the reams of printer paper they have on all of this data about what people are buying and what they need, and they're trying to calculate how many pairs of pantyhose to produce this season and all of this nonsense. That is the sort of authoritarian, totalitarian control that is hiding behind this, that most people will be led along into without even being able to say the name of what it is. It is technocracy that these people are going for, because that's the perfect system of control.
Yeah, which they're doing right now with all the processing plants, right? One, they've got a monopoly on them, and then two, they've been burning them up, flying planes into them, shutting them down, what have you, so that there's only one or two left, and they're saying, "Oh, sorry, this is how it is now. You can, take your cow and have it processed 3 years from now because there's a lineup. Sorry."
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah, and we know it in different terms. We know it in, like, we see it as globalism. It's globalism just deals whatever card, fascism, communism, whatever. They deal whatever card they need to achieve their ends. But we know the rest of it as social credit score, carbon credit score, UBIs, like you're saying. What else? Transhumanism, eugenics. Those are the terms we know all this by. But you're right. We feel like what you're saying is going to be one system, and that one system is all of that stuff rolled up into one package.
One health, one world.
And it seems inevitable. There's an inevitability to it because the technology itself seems predicated on the centralization of all this power and control. What are you going to do with all this technology? Let's create a digital currency. How will we administer that? Well, you need a digital ID, so you'll need your entire life to be on these digital databases that are controlled by the government, of course, and it'll all be so convenient and so simple. But we know how this movie plays out, and it's always a dystopia. It's never a utopia.
No, and it's funny because all the different psyops in the world, they all point to the same direction right now. Like even QAnon, all these people are saying, well, the power goes out, and then just don't worry, folks, it comes back on, and we're just Sarah Gacera, and you'll get your money, or you'll get your weight in gold back, and you get all your debts, given back to you.
Forgiven.
Right. But what they don't tell you is that then they say you'll be on the quantum financial system and everything will be great. Well, you're not. That's the same exact thing as the dystopian side is talking about. So they all point to the same direction right now.
Trust the plan. Yeah. No,
Right.
the fundamental psyop, the one that has truly captured almost everyone in the population for generations, has been the left-right psyop. Because we have been taught that the political spectrum is a spectrum. It is a line. It is a 2D line. It goes from left to right, and there's a center, and that's it. But that is not the political reality. There is a left and a right. I don't think that that's meaningless, but there is an up and a down. And the authoritarian, libertarian direction is a very, 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 very important part, and completely excluded from our mindset. So we can't even think in terms of up and down. But yes, whether you're authoritarian on the left or authoritarian on the right, I don't care. I'm against you. If you're
Yes.
libertarian, then we can talk about left and right and the meaning of that. But until we understand that other dimension to politics, it almost seems pointless in even discussing that sort of that left-right psyop.
Well, even the left and right, it looks identical. If you actually take both their agendas, they are identical. They might
because
be
it's authoritarian. It's
exactly.
always authoritarian, right?
Exactly.
Yes. But it's mind-boggling in this day and age, though, that so many people talk about the Great Awakening and they're so awake and they're researched, but they still spend 90% of their time playing into this divisionary narrative, and it's mind-boggling to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is all fake and it is all nonsense until people make it real, because. One of the things that I've encountered over the decades, look, I've spent a lot of time in the past couple of decades online and engaged in online discourse. And I've seen the evolution, the devolution of online discourse, where at one point people were treating online comments and fora like real world conversations.
Yes.
But over the last couple of decades, that has devolved to the point where, no, it is internet flame war conversations where you're just looking to score points by trolling people and, whatever, for the lulz and all of that stuff. Okay, so we understand that's online discourse, and that's not how people really act in the real world. But I think now we have a generation that's growing up that has existed in that online discourse. For them, they are being socialized through that. Yes. They're making that into reality.
Yes.
So that is becoming more and more like real world discourse to people. That's how we interact with people, like we do online, right? And I'm sitting here going, no, that's not how real people really interact with each other, or it shouldn't be. But unfortunately, it's becoming more and more like that. It's the medium is the message, but unfortunately, the message starts to speak through us at some point. We lose control of whatever control we had over this medium.
Right. Exactly right. And, no awareness at all of the fact that, going back to Elon Musk, here's a guy who is leading the edge on AI technology. Then he buys Twitter, and then all of a sudden AI is not part of his life anymore. We have watched Twitter to know enough that Twitter is run by AI now. And AI is not just a bunch of bots. AI is crafting narrative for whatever narrative it wants to push out. It's a storyteller now. And I'm watching, lately where it thinks I'm pro-Trump. And so it gives me a bunch of pro-Trump stuff, but it's been shifting now to pro-Kamala. So, it's a weird little, you can watch what they're doing by the narrative shift in Twitter.
Well, basically. Also, I mean, look, they've been openly admitting they've been doing psychological experiments on the population through these social media for years and years now. Remember when Facebook came out admitting that they were manipulating people's news feeds to see how it affected their moods?
Yeah,
that was several years ago now. But yeah, how much more refined is that? And the fact that even if they have identified you as pro-Trump or whatever it is, and they start feeding you pro-Kamala stuff, that may be in order to invite engagement, rage bait. I mean, that is a huge part of this. Anything to keep you invested in and on that platform and engaged with it. And if rage works better than, just patting you on the back and saying you're doing a good job, then they'll use that. And it is psychological manipulation on such a refined level that most people have just no idea what they're stepping into when they get into these social media spaces.
Well, even Michael, our producer, was saying, he was finding it overwhelming to keep up, because as long as he was posting 2, 3, 4 times a day, his posts were being seen. But if he kind of only posted once a day or once every other day, all of a sudden his posts were no longer being seen. So he was saying, he has noticed that you now have to basically live on the app in order for anybody to even see what you're doing or what you're saying or how important it may or may not be. I don't look at the likes and I don't look at the engagement. I just don't. I just put out there and then I move on. But I know Chris will engage. He's constantly in Twitter fights with people, and
not fights, just re-education. I would put it.
I get it. Hey, I'm not on social media now. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Insta. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on YouTube. I'm just not on social media broadly defined anymore. And you know what? There was a time in which I would have thought, well, how can you possibly do that? Like, I mean, as a podcaster who talks about news and politics, and I have to know what people are posting on Twitter or what have you. But actually, I found I don't. And I found it. Here's the real secret of how I can keep up with the news feeds and keep up with what's happening. I don't rely on a third-party middleman to algorithmically define what it is I'm seeing. Even if you follow people on Twitter, you're not necessarily seeing their tweets, right?
Exactly.
It used to be just a ranked sort of chronological list of people you follow, but now, of course, it's not that. It's whatever they want to show you, whenever they want to show it to you.
Right.
But there's a solution to that problem that has existed that predates social media itself. It's called RSS, really simple syndication. People don't even remember RSS anymore, unfortunately, but I subscribe to RSS feeds of various news sources and people that I want to follow. And then there's no middleman whatsoever. I just have an RSS list of here are all the headlines of articles, or here are all the podcasts. And I choose what I want to watch and listen to. And that, you know what, it works for me. I don't know. I can't speak for everyone, but I much prefer that than the social media nonsense that's going on right now.
Yeah, we have forgotten about RSS. The other thing I noticed you did is that you've got an account on archive.org, which I thought was actually really brilliant. So you
know what? You know why I did that? Back when I was first starting to get into just following independent media, not even starting the Corbett Report, but I remember, I don't know, 2005 or 4 or something like that. I remember just going through archive.org because they got all this media on there and it's, all this kind of crazy stuff. And I remember randomly stumbling on a clip of Bohemian Grove, the cremation of care ritual that obviously must be sourced from the Alex Jones documentary. But I can't remember what the title was, but it was presented completely contextless. Like, I don't even remember how I found it, but I'm watching this footage and I'm like, what the hell is this? And it was saying something about, like, politicians meeting in the woods in California. And I just thought, what is this craziness? But so when I started the Corbett Report, I remember thinking, well, I used to go to archive.org just to look for random stuff. I might as well just start putting it there. And I got out of that habit for a number of years, but it was 5 or 6 years ago. I thought, you know what? I'm sick of Twitter and TikTok and YouTube, which, of course, deleted my channel when I dared to talk about anything truthful, etc. So I'm sick of all these controlled. What's a good platform? And I thought, you know what? Archive.org has been up for 25, 30 years now, something like that, right? And there is some, it's not perfect, and there is some things that get deleted and what have you, but for the most part, no one even thinks to look there, so they don't think to delete it from there. So I'm just going to also, as I upload things to all of the other platforms, I'll upload it to archive.org as well, which has been I think is a nice hidey hole on the internet to hide things on, where the Eye of Sauron may not be directed, unfortunately, until the last couple of months, where clearly.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's been heavily under attack lately.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of research that I pulled from there, and that's good. I've got gigs of stuff from there, which is
that's the right way to do it, because a lot of people will find something online and okay, it's online. No. If you find something online, download it, because
immediately. Immediately. How many times have we seen stuff and it's like, oh, that's really good. Hey, look. And then it's gone. Literally within seconds, it's gone.
Well, we've recently had a problem with stuff being deleted off our own computers too. So now, I've been taking hard drives and putting it in Faraday boxes and making sure it's safe that way. But I thought it was crazy. But then I had a backup drive and I compared it to something I just recently downloaded, and 40 files were gone off my computer. So I verified that I'm not crazy.
You may look crazy.
Disused microwave makes a good Faraday cage for those.
Yes.
It does.
Yes, it does.
It does. Yeah,
it does.
No, we've got a super modified garbage can, which works too. So, so that works really well. So what's the big thing to keep an eye on for you in the next little while? Where should people be putting their attention?
I'm not one to tell people where to put their attention, because I hate it when people tell me where to put my attention. But I will say what I have my attention on personally.
Perfect.
For example, right now I'm in the midst of writing a 3-part series on Peter Thiel. and that'll be finishing this weekend. And I think it's important because it's another insight into sort of the meaningless nature of the left-right political sideshow. Peter Thiel, not only I think quite infamously at this point associated with J.D. Vance, who he bankrolled into the Senate and he affected the rapprochement with Trump that got him to be the Trump VP pick. Also, Elon Musk also said that his support of Trump was contingent on Vance being vice president. Which, with all of these, assassination attempts on Trump, what does this all add up to, right?
Right.
Anyway, at any rate, I think it's another insight into that, because Thiel not only funds Trump and Vance and that side, but he also has his snoot in the left side of the aisle as well. For example, Biden's national security advisor just happens to be an ex-Palantir consultant. And,
really? Okay.
Oh, by the way, as soon as that was discovered and pointed out in her official biography, it was scrubbed from her official biography. So thanks to the Wayback Machine, we can remember that. But yeah, things like that. But also, I mean, even if you just want to look at it, Thiel and Musk and people like that supporting Trump, and you've got Eric Schmidt and Bill Gates and people like that supporting Harris, it's the same technocrats. A lot of them still in the same PayPal mafia orbit are on both sides of the aisle. So that's just another good insight and window into that. Anyway, Thiel is an interesting character, and the ultimate point I'm getting to with this is, who is he really? Because he calls himself a libertarian. Everything you ever read about him will say libertarian Peter Thiel. And it's to me, that's just one big psyop. Yeah, Palantir and this surveillance AI state of spying on everything you do and collecting your data and databases for the intelligence agencies and AI targeting systems in Ukraine and Israel and places like that. That's all libertarian. We know that.
Of course,
no, it isn't. So who is he really? That's what.
Yeah. All I know is he took down Gawker because they wrote a bad story about him.
Yeah. That free speech libertarian advocate who
totally right.
How dare he?
So, have you ever had eyes on Mark Carney? Have you ever put your targets on him yet?
Yeah. I haven't. That's a good point. I should do a Mark Carney deep dive. Because, hey, I'm Canadian. But yeah, I have definitely talked about him. Type Carney into my search engine, you'll find a number of things. But I've never done like a deep dive on Carney specifically. But he is obviously an interesting critter. Not only, Bank of Canada to Bank of England, and now he's running the UN green finance swindle. Like, there's some serious.
Well, he was he was at Goldman Sachs during the crash in 2008, then moved on to the IMF BIS for the solution to the problem that's Goldman Sachs created. He's part of every...
wasn't he on the board of the Financial Stability Board that they
He's on every board, like every financial board you can imagine. He's a part of that. Not to mention every single shady secret society, from Chatham House to Trilaterals. He's everywhere.
Yeah.
This guy.
We're pretty sure he's going to be our next prime minister. Not voted in, of course, just named by the Liberal Party.
Right.
And then from there, he'll actually be named the main guy in charge of the North America zone. What are we, zone 2, zone 3, as per the UN website?
I was thinking it might be Freeland, but either way.
Oh, she's bucking for NATO right now. So, and she'll probably get it because she loves her Ukraine, right? So anyway, so well, and speaking of everywhere, you've got several shows that you do in a week. I know that you're co-host with I forget his name, but
James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com.
He's great with words, that guy. I really like him.
He's a real deal radio guy. That was his career and his training. So, but now he does Media Monarchy full time, and I'm glad he does, because he is a great voice, literally and figuratively. And we do New World Next Week. Every week we try to cover 3 stories that you may or may not have seen in independent media that are news stories of worth. But the problem with that show, it's a news show, but we record it 24 hours before you see it. So there's always the kind of asterisk, this might have changed in the 24 hours.
Exactly. Yeah, things have changed. So best place to find is CorbettReport.com, correct?
That's right. CORBETT report.com. And yes, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on BitChute, I'm on Archive, I'm on Substack, but go to CorbettReport.com. I used to tell people in YouTube land, I am going to be censored. It is going to happen. Please go to CorbettReport.com. At the very least, just bookmark it for a rainy day. But now, every time I'm on somebody's program who has a YouTube channel, I'll go and look at the comments, and it'll all be like, "Oh, I forgot about you. Oh, I thought you went away. I thought they killed you, man." Whatever.
Well, they did. They killed your show, but they didn't kill you.
No, we're currently kicked off ourselves, but
yeah, YouTube doesn't like us either. That's fine. And Rubble's been messing with us as well. So we just tell everybody TFMreport.com. That's the safest, easiest, fastest way to find
Do you have
it.
an RSS feed? That's the question.
Well, we are going to as of tomorrow for sure.
I will subscribe to it as of tomorrow then.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael Chuchung, our producer extraordinaire, will have that set up for us. We can probably do it ourselves, but yeah. So how can people support you, James? You've been around.
The best way to support me really, truly is to take the information that you like and help share it.
Okay.
You know, give links to my stuff if you want, but just say it's your information if you want. I don't care. Just share the information. That's the number one way. Monetarily, yeah, I couldn't do this without the support of people out there. So if you are a Corbett Report fan and you have used the website and you know about it, then you can think about signing up for a subscription, $1 a month or up. I appreciate. But people sometimes ask me, you know, well, what do I get out of being a member? And if that is your question, I say don't become a member. Because essentially I do have a subscriber newsletter, but the editorial that I write, like that Peter Thiel editorial, is for free up on my Substack if you just want to access it for free. So everything I do is for free and out in the open. If you want to support the work, then you can become a member.
Yeah,
I love that. What do I get? Well, information, which is priceless. How about that?
It's going away. And there are so few deep divers in the world. Like, you know, you've gotten obviously really good at finding information. It's taken us quite a long time to start getting kind of good at it. But
well, and find other paths, because the old paths are being cut off, or information is conveniently being redacted from the old paths. So it's about getting a little bit fancier and creative with how we find the information. But it's not just one spot. You got to vet that information, because that's the real chore.
All about triangulating information. Never rely on a source. Always things that you can find from multiple different sources, and you can get a better handle on.
Right. Yeah.
So
don't just take one Twitter post and go with it.
No. So it's hours and hours and hours of research just for one, 15-minute story, if that.
Right. Now, sometimes when I'm writing my articles, I know what I want to say, and I know that the proof exists out there. But just the fact that going and sourcing the right links to back up what I'm saying can sometimes take like 2 hours to write this one paragraph. It's
exactly.
People will never understand how much work goes into this.
My challenge is that once you start going down that rabbit hole, you see that it's so spiderweb together that making sense of they have convoluted that so well that making sense of it and detangling that for people is the hardest part.
Yeah, that's why I don't think what I do, it's calling it journalism or research, education, because it's like a professor trying to put things together in a way that will make sense to you. And if I do that, then mission accomplished.
Right.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, James, I can't tell you how excited we were to have you on the show. We're big fans, not just because you have a microphone, but because we really respect people who do the deep dives and do the hard research. And we just love having people like you on the show because we can talk.
I love to see switched on Canadians. So once you get that RSS feed up, I will subscribe. Okay.
We will get that up, and we'll do that as soon as possible. And we've got a Substack going as well that we don't put enough effort
we
into.
don't do enough. We're too busy with other things, but we need to put more effort into that for sure.
Yeah.
But thank you for getting us started, getting us interested in real truth, and taking us down the research pathways that we've been on for the last 4 years, Chris, probably 15, 20 years. But you were our inspiration to dig deeper. Don't just take things at face value, actually dig deeper, look for numerous sources. And that's where you find the truth, somewhere in the middle. So thank you very much for leading our way and our journey into this so-called truth movement, making the future better movement. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for actually doing something with the information, because that's the other half.
That's what we tell people. Don't just take our word for it. Go and research for yourselves.
And then share. Talk at the water cooler, talk at the gas stations, talk in the lines at the grocery store. Share it out, because there's no better thing you can do to create change than to share the information.
Yep.
That's it.
All right, James, thanks for coming on, and thanks for watching, everybody. Go check out CorbettReport.com for excellent research. There's just so few and far between. People are more opinion-based than fact-based, and you're just going to get a lot of good information from James's website. So CorbettReport.com, please go check it out. And James, thank you. Hope you come back sometime, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys. Anytime.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.